Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sons of Liberty. No, we got okay.
Why the fuck? This isn't a frat. This isn't a frat. This is Sons of Liberty. Bro, this isn't a frat. Like we're three idiots.
You've never been that
Not on God.
before.
Not on God.
Oh my gosh.
Yo, what's up? It's King Chow.
We're not a rap
Nobody
squad.
knows.
We're not a rap squad. We're like like gang rap.
Kanye
rap.
West.
Like Kanye.
Oh yes.
The
Speaking
baby.
Speaking of Kanye West, I'm here with.
I'm Kaika. I play Destiny 2 for a living.
I'm Sunny. I'm here with my two special co-host.
Hello.
Yeah, we got some special guests here. We got
Hello.
got some Xerox and Titanium.
Damn.
Yes.
So enthusiastic guest. Thank you.
Yep. And today we're gonna be doing something a little different. Kaika, take it away.
Oh shit. Okay, so today's gonna be more of a general politics type vibe, and maybe we could get into some philosophy. I guess let's get right into it. Let's talk about a hot button issue, which is healthcare. So, of course, all three of us, me, Chow, and Sunny, we all believe that healthcare should be privatized. Now, I know that some people in this call have an argument for socialized healthcare. Do you mind explaining why?
Quietly loads rifle. Hey, how about you tell us what's going on?
Okay. Maybe this was a miscalculation.
I mean, I have a mixed opinion. I believe that if we had like a large amount of health supplies, that socialized healthcare would be good. But in a limited healthcare sense, privatized is preferred.
So here's what I think. I think that there's both positives and negatives for it to be socialized. The positives would be that you would be helping out the people who can't afford healthcare, and you would be helping them, say, for example, pay braces off, which cost about $3,000, or pay for a $15,000 surgery, which they wouldn't be able to pay off, of course, if they're not financially wealthy, or it would take them a long time to pay off. However, I recognize that there are issues with universal healthcare, such as poor management by the government. And at the end of the day, when you have privatized healthcare, you have more options and better options available to everyone.
Yeah, my only counter to that would be the private sector is really good at feeling out the market. Mm-hmm. So if there's really a need for very cheap healthcare, there will be very cheap healthcare under the condition that it's not regulated at all and it allows to sort of be in free spirit. I think, Chow, you have the same thought process as me.
Yeah, actually, I'd say I'd go a little farther. In my opinion, I cannot really envision a system. Okay, I can, but I don't really think it would make very much sense where the government's one of its jobs is to pay for the healthcare, just because on some level I feel like that falls under the banner of personal responsibility. Now, I think that there should be a very basic level of healthcare that should be provided for, because the government, one of its things is to protect the citizens, and sometimes that does involve and cross over with medical services that maybe the citizen shouldn't pay for. But I think everything outside of the most basic necessities probably should be private, just because this allows for a much larger range of options to appear, because sort of when you subject the healthcare system to the needs of the market, supply and demand, and a type of economic natural selection, right? You end up with only the best, hospitals and doctors and nurses and medical staff being able to succeed. But there is another thing that I do want to mention before I, close my statement here, and that is the problem with publicizing and socializing healthcare is how the government fundamentally deals with medical staff. Right now, there is a limit to how many doctors can be in service in the United States at all. And I believe, the last time I checked, it was somewhere in the range of 125,000. That's bad. 125,000 doctors a year can only be, given their doctorate, their medical doctorate, and be licensed practitioners and be allowed to serve as an official doctor. That's a problem. It puts a bottleneck on the ability of the medical system to treat patients because of what is essentially government bureaucracy getting in the way. And this is part of the reason why I believe that the government only serves to slow, not progress. But that's just me.
Yeah, I sort of see it as like, do I really want the people at the DMV controlling my healthcare? The answer is no, because if you've never been to the DMV, the lines are always slow, the people could give two shits about you and your family, and they're probably underfunded. So when I look at the DMV, that's what I reference when people say they want socialized healthcare. I just don't want it.
The one thing that like socialized healthcare would, however, remove is it would optimize or at least or completely just obliterate from culture the charge master of hospitals, which is what describes the billing for every article and item in medical care. Which, if you got a hospital bill, you know that they can often be very expensive for very small things. Sometimes a cough drop could be a single cough drop is occasionally found to be $5 in some hospitals. And
which is an absolute ripoff.
Right, and the charge master is the one thing to blame for it, and it is mainly due to the lack of government funding and mainly for privatization of hospitals. But knowing that if we were going to have the government fund a socialized healthcare system, it would have to either put a massive amount of spending into it in order to ensure that the change from unsocialized healthcare to socialized healthcare would not become too dramatic, because I would have a feeling that if it was too dramatic a change, people would quit being a doctor because of the changes in benefits. Because if you're a doctor, you're getting paid quite a lot of money. If you're in something even more advanced like neurosurgery, you are probably beyond 5 digits normal money. And if we were going to socialize healthcare, that would definitely cause some change, which would cause doctors to want to get out of the profession or seek more privatization, thus creating free healthcare alongside privatized healthcare for one, for the more like basic issues, and then two, for the more exotic problems such as cancer and more of the deadlier things that we can't really take control of right now. But it would also create a change in between the middle class and the 1% if we were to implement it that way, which would probably not be preferred.
These are actually, like, I would say a lot of solid points, but I do have one problem with what you said, and that was that essentially that the charge master, the people running the hospitals, privately, are the ones that are inherently deciding the prices, and because healthcare is such a is so in demand, because everyone will at some point need healthcare, right? It is a very necessary good, that it's something that doesn't really seem ripe for privatization because it's just ripe for abuse. They can just overcharge as much as they want. But I think that that's sort of missing the government's role in that, because fundamentally a big portion of why hospitals can get away with charging so much for their services is directly because of the government. Like I said, with the government artificially limiting the amount of doctors that can receive their doctorates and become, licensed practitioners, but also in many other ways, where the government has directly meddled with the healthcare system, which of course most people call privatized, but really it should just be called regulated, because it's really the worst of both worlds. You have the absolute price gouging of a corporation, but then that's fueled by the inefficiencies of a government. It really is sort of like one of the worst systems. And yet, America is by far one of the holders of one of the best healthcare systems in the entire world. I get that there are others, and that those others do on occasion, they don't, not on occasion, but like some of them do have socialized healthcare systems. But my point is that there are way more examples of healthcare systems that are privatized and give much better treatment than the other way around. And so it may be more worthwhile to consider that maybe the value that privatized healthcare gives to society isn't just that it opens up a new job market for entrepreneurs and laborers to work in, that isn't directly managed by a bloated bureaucracy, but also that it might give better service.
I think it's important to mention that most people coming from different countries, even with socialized healthcare, come to America for treatment. And you see that time and time again, even with our neighbor Canada.
They come to us because our service is better.
Our service is better because we don't have full-on socialized healthcare. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like healthcare could vary by country in terms of what systems would be effective. So, in countries like Scandinavia, which is widely talked about as, the champion of socialized healthcare and its successes, but there's a key difference. Their population is very small compared to the United States, so it would already be easier to manage how the healthcare system works. It wouldn't be overflowed if there was a major issue. Another thing is that having the government spend so much money on healthcare would not necessarily be a good thing, because that would take away from other factors. But the main thing, as Kaika mentioned earlier, is that we don't want the DMV running the hospital, because the DMV works quite inefficiently. The service is poor. The quality is poor. It's poor standards. And, as you mentioned with Canada, people come to the US from Canada because there are complaints that they have to wait months and some occasions to receive an appointment for something that could take weeks, if not just days, with privatized healthcare. So that's why I think that in some countries, like Denmark, more specifically, with a population of about 5.5 million people, it would be better to have socialized healthcare. But in a population of 330 million people, which is the United States, I think that privatized healthcare should definitely remain. And in my opinion, it is preferable over socialized healthcare.
All right. Well,
Cool.
all right. Now they've stated their opinions. Now it's for the best. Never mind. Anyways, so my opinion on this is that the government should basically stay out of it for the most part, because if they are more involved, I feel like we'll lose our own independence, and that if it feels like we're being controlled and our every move is being controlled by the government, and it's basically like we're toddlers. But yet again, we are not toddlers. We're grown like adults that should be taking care of ourselves. And yes, the bill always comes to a great cost, but that's because of the great technologies and people who are actually taking care of us. Yeah, that's all I gotta say. Basically, I think it shouldn't be socialized, especially in our type of economy and the amount of people that we have. Those other countries have smaller populations, so it's easier to manage the healthcare system than our nation, which has quite a bit of population. Yeah.
Epic.
And
All right.
I think this kind of goes back to my point that I was saying before, which was essentially, I think that to some degree, uh, paying for healthcare does sort of fall under personal responsibility. Not toddlers. We should, to some degree, pay for the service that we get because,
Exactly.
and also, I think this is one last thing that I want to say in it before either someone else wants to give a closing statement or until we move on to the next topic, is that fundamentally you still pay for it. And this is something that I think a lot of people who advocate for socialism and socialist policies in general don't consider, is that uh, refusing to pay for something like and then shirking that responsibility off to the government doesn't actually stop you from paying for it. It just makes you pay less of it and makes other people uninvolved pay for your decisions. Fundamentally, it just all comes back through taxes. And if it doesn't come through taxes, then it's going to debt. And either way, it's not looking good for, uninvolved Americans who didn't need the service. To some degree, I feel like this is one of those situations where, yes, we can be charitable, but we shouldn't be forcing people to pay for other people's situation and decisions.
Yep.
All
I
right.
think we came full circle here. So let's talk
Exactly.
about something that is near and dear to our hearts. A lot of us are going to pursue a higher education. So let's talk about schooling. So there's been a lot of talk recently about paying off all student debt. And I think there's been a bunch of interesting arguments. I think, from like my perspective personally, paying off all student debt seems unreasonable, considering there's over $1 billion worth of debt. I think it's growing. It actually might be more than that. Um, I think the best way is just to remove interest rates on these loans, because a lot of people are not even paying for the loans; they're just paying interest. And I also think that the government should be able to deny certain people loans, because I'm sorry, if you're studying, gender theory, you're not really going to get far. Planned Parenthood only pays 30 to 40K a year. What do you guys think about it?
I mean,
Uh,
I think that yeah, you do you want to go, Son?
no, you go. You're the guest. We want to hear your opinion. They've already heard enough of our opinions. Let's hear your opinion.
I think that it would be very reasonable to remove the interest rates, and as Kaika said, if people are going into a profession that doesn't pay a lot and they're offered loans, that would be a lot of money spent. But there's really two sides to this argument. On one side, you're helping a lot of people who are drowning in debt because college is crazy expensive right now, especially the more popular ones like UCLA, USC, and then it just goes up the list in terms of price. Like uh, USC's over $50,000. That's a lot of money. Uh, so on one hand, forgiving student debt would greatly help a lot of people, but on the other hand, it would worsen the situation nationally because the US is already in a lot of debt. So yeah, I just think that there's two ways to think about this. And yeah.
I think. Oh,
What?
do you want to go, Joe?
Oh, I just you can go. I have a
Okay.
lot to say.
I think there's one major issue with forgiving student loans, and that is it only helps the current generation. It doesn't help the next generation, right? Because if you only forgive the current student loan debt, well, people are going to incur more loans, and we're going to have the same issue in a couple of years. So it's going to be a constant cycle that realistically we cannot fulfill. We are already, in a major load of debt, as Titanium said, and inflation's already 8% this year. And if we pay off people's student loans, it's only going to devalue the money even more because there's more money in circulation, therefore devaluing the currency.
Okay, so I have a lot to say about this, but mainly I think my point is that really the question that we should be asking is not should the government give forgiveness on student loans and maybe even forgive all student loans, or just pay for all college tuition completely, as some of the more radical circles would suggest. But really the question should be, why is college tuition so high in the first place? It wasn't always like this, of course. This is another situation of government involvement directly leading to a price increase, which was eerily similar to a previous topic. It was actually the government, I believe a little less than 100 years ago, sort of managing these colleges and focusing on improving the standard of quality of these colleges that allowed them to receive funding from the government in some parts, like state-owned schools like UCLA, like you mentioned previously. And this has, in addition to other outside factors, allowed colleges to directly spike the prices. And they have not gone down because the government has not stopped regulating the colleges. But that's not really where I'm going with this. That is definitely something that we should consider, but that doesn't really solve the problem. Here's how I see it, right? Personally, I am I can leak this to the public because I don't really care if people know, right? My plan is currently focused around reducing as much debt as I can from my shoulders when I'm going to college. I'm going to take 2 years of community college, and then I'm going to take around 4 years of mainline college at CSUN. This was a strategic choice that put me back about 2 or 3 years from where I would have been if I wanted to rush through college and go to a much more prestigious school. I did this for multiple reasons, but one of them was because I knew that that college was going to cost a lot, and I wanted to mitigate as much cost as I can without resorting to loans and being crippled with debt in my late 20s. Now here's the thing. This is a decision that I am making because I am in a privileged position to where my parents are going to help me pay for college, and I am at a specific financial state in my life where I can do this. I do not feel like I need to rush through college, and this is an option for me. It's not an option for everyone, and I understand that. But fundamentally, the extra 2 years of community college that I'm taking for free to get my gen ed out of the way is a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice of my time that other people do not want to make. That is a choice, and that choice has consequences. If people want to go straight into college for a 4-year, or if they're sweaty, maybe even a 3.5 year, all right, fine. But the side effect of that decision is that it will cost more. The thing about going to community college is it's free. It takes longer because you have to transfer, but it's free. And taking those 2 extra years is a good way of reducing debt in a way that does not rely on the government or take money from others through taxes. Now, let's say I'm 28. And let's say that now I am getting charged more through taxes because the next generation of students and the next generation of politicians has successfully won over, total government student loan forgiveness. And now those charges are having to be paid by the government, and the government pays them in the way that it pays for everything, with our money. How is that fair to me?
It isn't. And I think you made a good point about how college became so expensive. It really became so expensive because the government got into it.
Mhm.
And this mainly has to do with the fact that the loans are, you can't file for bankruptcy on them, right? So when you get this loan from the government, you have to pay it off for the rest of your life, even if you don't have the money. Bankruptcy is just not an option. Therefore, if it's not an option, colleges could just increase the price and increase the price with no type of repercussion
And
because
make
they know
make students take courses that they don't really believe in, just to bloat the course size and give them more money.
exactly. So it's really the government's fault that this is really happening. And I'm not saying that the government should make loans where you could file for bankruptcy, but I mean it's their issue.
Right.
So, you know,
It shouldn't be our issue, and yet it is.
Sub-Xerox, you have anything to mention on this?
I guess the main thing would be, I assume you guys know Sally Mae, otherwise known as SLM. It is one of the main loan providers in the U.S., and it started out in 1972, and over time since 2004, it has privatized, going from federal education loans into private loans, which have been more expensive and have even had precautions which remove all abilities to remove debt or remove any type of restriction on the loan. And what do you guys think? Should we have Sallie Mae be given back to the government, back under the control of the government, or remain its own separate entity? While it's kind of similar back to the medical question, should we allow Sallie Mae to be its own organization, which basically decides the futures of Americans, or shall we have it go back to the government?
I mean, I haven't really done a lot of research on this, but personally, I think I'd rather have it privatized. Just because, can you file for bankruptcy on these loans?
You cannot.
You
That's
cannot. Then
if
then no.
it
I mean,
was
it
a
doesn't matter
government
at this point.
loan, you possibly could, with various other reasons as to why you're filing to bankruptcy, because you can't file for bankruptcy by itself for student loans. But Sallie Mae, since it's privatized, you cannot do anything to remove the debt besides actually paying it.
So we still have the same issue where people can't file for bankruptcy. Thus, there's no incentive for colleges to make the loan to make the price actually less, so that their students can pay off the loans. We come back to this issue where, I mean, it doesn't really matter what happens to Sallie Mae.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coolio. Sonny, you have anything to add or no?
I mean, going to our college years ourselves, at least for me, I'm going to a 2-year college that's pretty free because of financial aid and stuff like that. But after that, I'm probably going to be getting loans, and obviously, with those loans, I would have to pay off the debt. Now, going back all the way back from the beginning to your point of like certain people should be denied, especially for those who, in my opinion, useless degrees that only will cause them financial pain in the future, is just stupid. I mean, this part of them taking the degree is stupid, not the part that, the banks or whoever giving the loan should just say, no, I'm not going to give you a loan. But then again, the people giving the loans will make money off them. So to be honest, I think it's just stupid in the end. And as you said before, it's completely the government's fault for getting involved. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about the matter.
Coolio. Let's move
Alright.
on to our next topic, which is
Oh, yay.
policing.
Yay!
So this one's controversial.
Oh.
Actually, this one's not as controversial as it used to be. But I'm pretty sure it's controversial for literally radical Democrats and everyone else. So it's literally like that 10% versus the 90% at this point.
Oh, and then of course there's the 0.1% of conflicted and caps, but I'll give that plenty of light.
Okay. So the first thing we have about this topic is, should the police receive more funding? Right. Um, I'll leave it to you guys because I know the viewers already know our opinions on this. To our guests.
All right. So, in my opinion, I do not believe that the police should receive more funding because police already have a lot of weapons and equipment at their disposal. And by Western standards, and in comparison to pretty much any other Western country, they are actually very heavily armed in comparison to police in other countries. Now, of course, there's exceptions. Uh, in other Western countries, like in the European Union, police are only heavily armed if there's a terrorist attack or if there's some type of emergency that allows them to do that. Otherwise, they have to follow strict protocol to make sure that uh, people who get into a negative situation with police don't get injured or killed. So, like in Spain, I'm going to give an example. Spain is actually one of the most, or Spanish police are actually one of the most aggressive towards protesters in the European Union. But even in Spain, they have a protocol where you can't shoot at the person first. You have to shoot around them or like at a car or at a building or something. But you can't shoot them first. And there's a few shots that have to be fired. And after you shoot those shots, you're not allowed, or police in Spain are not allowed to shoot them in the head. They instead shoot them in the leg. So they get injured and they fall down and get arrested, but they don't get killed. Whereas here, there has been a lot of cases and in which police have killed, shot many times, and have shot to killed rather than attempting dialogue, as in many other Western countries, or simply shooting them in an area in which will not inflict death, which will not be deadly to the person being fired at, to the criminal. So uh, there's statistics like that state that police in the U.S. are generally more uh, trained and equipped for combat rather than for dialogue or for attempting to diffuse the situation. So, for example, uh, in Denmark, Finland, and Germany, uh, police are far less likely to kill people. So, like, for example, uh, American police are 18 times more lethal than Danish police, 26 times more lethal than German police, and 100 times more lethal than Finnish police because of the different protocol that the United States has compared to pretty much any other Western country.
I think most of that is caused by the 1033 program, which is an interesting topic. Whenever anybody says defund the police, I say that you should fund them more, but heavily prohibit the 1033 program, which is the retirement of military hardware towards the police. Whenever, say, a tank or a grenade launcher or like specific things in the military, such as automatic rifles, get past their expiration date, they are immediately given to civilian law enforcement. And there's a very few things that are prohibited. One of the three of the few things that are prohibited is body arm. Well, two of the things: body armor and Kevlar helmets. So you can't have any military armor given to police, which is questionable. But it is notable that there was also 3 other things that were prohibited by 1033 that were not allowed to be given to police. This included tracked armored vehicles, and that includes tanks, APCs, and mainly Humvees. Humvees that can survive rocket-propelled grenades or mines. Some of them were even designed to go into minefields, which we don't have a lot in the Los Angeles area. We don't have a lot of minefields. I don't know about which country you live in or if you live in America, but we don't have that many minefields. And additionally, there's grenade launchers as well and bayonets. And on their website for 1033, especially on the DLA's website, they actually have numbers for how much Executive Order 1368, which blocked those 3 things, and specifically how much they blocked. And they blocked 126 tracked armored vehicles, 138 grenade launchers, and 1,623 bayonets, which, for police use, I don't really get why you would need to give police bayonets. Bayonets are the type of thing that were back in World War One era and were barely effective there. And they're still being used. They're mainly given to police, which does not seem like a good solution because we already have. It often comes up that police hostility can be caused by mainly beating, and adding bayonets to the tip of weapons does not really add to that thing. Additionally, I really think that the 1033 program is really getting rid of the point of funding police, since the police are being armed heavily by military-grade weaponry. They aren't going to give non-lethal weaponry or other things because they aren't receiving as much funding for equipment and supplies. Mainly because the items that are sent by Project 1033, since its inception in 1990, is almost $7.4 billion of military equipment that have been sent to the police. Which, if we had it the other way around, where instead of giving military weapons to the police and instead funded that money to the police, we could have much more effective non-lethal response. And as a downside, we would have less SWAT at the same time. SWAT is controversial in how it deals with its problems by immediately... Well, for one, they are not very effective due to their lack of reliability in getting the correct locations or in securing the correct suspects, as seen in various numbers of swatting cases, or when innocents are harmed by no-knock raids. What do you guys think about the 1033 program in its current state? Do you think we should fund the police more and get rid of the 1033 program? Or what do you guys think?
Personally, I think there's only one way to solve crime in neighborhoods, and that's if you fill the area with police. Because generally speaking, once the area or the neighborhood is swept from crime, businesses can invest and therefore create job growth. In referring to the 1033 program, or is it 1033? I don't know. I have mixed emotions about it. I get why having a bayonet on, just having a bayonet might not be necessary. That's understandable, but I think it does provide some good work. For example, I forget where it was, but in Texas there was an event where this guy held hostage 50 or 60 people in a house because of his religion or whatever. I think it was in El Paso, actually. Do you guys know what I'm talking about, or no? Am I being dumb?
Yeah, I
You
think
do.
I don't.
Titanium. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I believe I have heard of the event. It happened years ago, right?
Yeah, years ago.
Okay, I have heard of it.
I'll try and look it up. But I think in situations where there's a high security risk, there should be an option for police to use military grade equipment, especially if we're talking about an insurrection or someone holding hostage 100+ people, which is possible. It has happened before. But I don't think it really should be used in general situations.
I'm kind of not in big favor of your promotion of police filled. You mentioned something about like having more police. I remember as I was reading about 1033, there was one occasion where grenade launchers were actually given to an organization which counts as civilian law enforcement, mainly to protect schools. And the 1033 program basically sponsored this program by providing grenade launchers to the organization. And I have read before that in some communities that have high security with police, it is often not a good influence. From what it says, it's basically it treats students terribly, and often it can create uh, a feeling of delinquents because some students who don't go with the rules of the school are treated harshly, since we have police who are trained to deal with criminals harshly are put into school grounds. And that's just one example of how having more police in different scenarios is not too great. There's probably a million more possible. That's the one which clearly glared most, but yeah.
I just think that it's the mentality of how police are trained here. Police here aren't really trained to have a lot of dialogue with a person in a situation, and they're trained really for combat, right? And uh, they don't receive too much training in terms of, you know, trying to diffuse the situation. They receive a lot of training in regards to when the situation is already present and getting out of control.
I think my
So,
counter to or to titanium is the reason why police are not really they don't really have dialogue with people is because of the Constitution and your Miranda rights. So if you don't know what that means, is your Miranda rights are basically what suggests you don't have to talk to a police officer if you believe that it could incriminate yourself. And the Fifth Amendment basically suggests that a police, someone in court cannot use evidence against you without your own free will. So because of that, police are sort of in this tightrope situation where if they talk to someone and they are not informed about their Miranda rights, which is by law required, they can be in deep trouble.
all right. But that's why I think there's so many cases of people getting killed when they could have probably just been injured and saved. Uh, Again, going back to Europe, police there are trained. I mean, of course, there's differences, major differences in how policing works here in Europe. But the statistics show that less people get killed when uh, police have more dialogue, when police are trained to diffuse the situation rather than uh, increase the tension in the situation, as it appears to be here. And it shows with the number of people getting killed. In Finland, no people have been killed for many years. I think two in about a decade ago, one for 2010, I believe, and the other for 2011. Completely pales into comparison where about 1,000 people get killed by police every year. And I understand there's situations where police are in grave danger and they use force to try and protect themselves because they, also have a risk of getting killed. But I feel like a lot of times the situation can be diffused with dialogue and uh, and it does not happen that way because police are trained differently here than in other Western countries.
I think an important thing to note here, Titanium, is that a lot of the police killings are very inflated in America. So more people in America believe that people are killed more than they actually are. So, for example, last year there were only 14 people who died by gun violence due to police. Only 14. Now, if you ask the average person, I remember this very clearly, an average Democrat believes it's over 1,000 people who died by gun violence, and the average Republican believes it's less than 100. So there's a very large disparity in America right now where people believe that the police are more violent than they are, which could fuel the fact that people are less willing to cooperate with the police. So I think it's more of a, I don't know if stigma is the right word, but how people believe the police are to be. I think more people believe that they're out to get them than they really are.
I mean, there's a difference in how cases are classified. Like many of them would be considered justified, I assume, and only a very, very small amount, as you said, what was it, 14, would be considered unjustified.
Well, the 14 is like people who died due to gun violence by police. So if a police officer feels like they need to shoot someone in order to protect themselves, then that would be counted as gun violence, right? And a lot of these cases that are perceived to be unjustified, like the Derek Chauvin case, with George Floyd, that is included. Well, not excuse me, not that is included. But when a police officer is prosecuted for a death under some type of gun violence, that would be perceived as unjustified. And as far as I remember, I may be wrong, I don't think there is even one prosecution of a police officer um, due to their involvement in a shooting that resulted in a death. In 2020, at least. I'm not saying throughout the years. Chow, do you have anything to add?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Are you all done? Because this might take a while.
Oh, okay. All right, go for it.
Okay. So let's just get the cringe anarchist shit out of the way. There is something to, ask about the legitimacy of police. I'm not trying to be some cringe Antifa, ACAB leftist here, but there actually is something that you could think about as to why the police have a right over all other groups and all of the people to interfere with your life. And basically, it can be summarized as the state's monopoly on violence. When a citizen commits a violent act against another citizen, or a member of government, or a police officer, or anyone, right, it is automatically unjust. Now, normally, when you have policies like that, that would be universal. Maybe violence isn't allowed at all. Maybe it should only be allowed for self-defense. I think that's all reasonable, but then, apparently, we as a society have accepted that police violence, the state's violence, is okay because the state should have a monopoly on violence so it can better protect the citizens. And the thing about that is, I don't inherently agree or disagree with that. I truly do think it could go either way. If let's take the sort of the ANCAP private police theory, and then let's talk about the liberal democracy theory. So the ANCAP private police system would be that basically it would be somewhat similar to samurai, but just sort of disorganized. Like you would have hitman, but it would be more like, instead of hiring someone for a hit on another person, it would be like a bodyguard or just like police to survey your area as like a service, right? And this system, I think, should only be resorted to if we can no longer trust the state to be the night watchman, which is where we get into the liberal democracy idea, which is essentially that the police should only exist to keep everyone safe and to protect everyone's rights. That's what I first and foremost believe in. I don't think that we should defund the police. That's the Antifa's way of subverting the system while actually doing nothing. Most of the time when the police was defunded, it drastically decreased the quality of life, and so naturally the funding was restored, because nothing is ever permanent when leftists do it. But the important part is that this idea of defunding the police, it does not work. All right, we either need to have no police, or we need to have police. There's no in the middle. All right, now, as I think that we should have police. I think that as long as we can trust the government, which is shaky, but as long as we can, reform the government to be only in the best interest of the people, and so therefore the police would be only in the best interest of the people, I think that policing is just and fair, and that this state can have a monopoly on violence, but only if it earns it. Now, how does this relate to the more specific issues like 1033 and the hand-me-downs of military hardware? Personally, I do not believe that the police should be given hand-me-down military equipment, ironically, except for the armor, because the armor doesn't hurt anyone. I think that, yes, police should be equipped with better armor, military-grade armor, to protect themselves. I think that protection is all well and good, and there should be no restrictions on the level of armor that police can have. Realistically, why would there be? It just means that the police officers are safer, situations are less tense, and like Titanium said, more dialogue can happen without the risk of constant death. Now, when it comes to weapons, I don't think that the police should be given military-grade weapons that are hand-me-downs from the military. I think that police funding is all well and good, and it should not be reduced, but it also should not really be increased from pre-2020 BLM riot standards. I think that the way we had the police right now was, if nothing else, good enough. And as it stands, there's a lot of work to be done as it involves with reforming the government so it is more in service of the people, reforming the laws so less people are being criminalized for victimless crimes, and, most importantly, reforming the police. Yes, reforming the police with the goal of making the citizens' well-being the top priority.
If you're done, King
I
Shao,
am done.
I would like to state that I completely agree with your point on the funding of the police and the purpose of police, that it should better serve to protect instead of intimidate citizens.
Exactly.
So I think in terms of funding that police should not receive more funding, but I definitely don't think that they should be defunded,
Exactly.
because I feel like the situation would get far worse if there was no police, or if it was very poorly funded, and it would likely result in cases where the National Guard or even the military would have to come in to solve, be it insurrections or whatnot. So I think it should just be US police should just be more along the lines of police in other Western countries like Canada and the European Union. But other than funding, there's no major issues.
All right. Well, I actually disagree with both you on the fact that we shouldn't be giving the police military hand-me-downs or even grading the funding, because think of it, there's new technologies out there to better handle certain situations, and with those new technologies, you need to buy them, and they get more expensive every year. So realistically, we kind of do need to raise the funding. And yes, some people are scared of M4s. Sometimes police have them. Remember, they are allowed to. Only a certain amount of police are allowed to. You typically they have military background or they went through a course to safely use one. Now, um, yes, I agree that they should not be defunded. I mean, look what happened when they were defunded. Crime went up, murders went up, everything went up. If you remember from a previous podcast, we watched a video where 3 kids were being shot in the street. Luckily, no one was harmed, but if there are police there, like like Kaika said, there should be more police around that more criminal area, and that wouldn't have happened. They would have been handled differently, and good, for goodness sake, they weren't harmed at all. But think of it, if police were there, it would have been handled differently. And yeah, that's what I got to say. Anyone
All
else?
right. I believe that we have touched on the topic of policing a lot. Let's, if everyone else has said their piece.
Let's move on.
Yeah, let's
Alright,
move on
then.
to
Alright.
gun control. I'll actually start
Ooh.
us off on this one because I
Alright.
feel very strongly about it. Gun control is bullshit. That is my opinion, and I'm not saying it necessarily like objectively wrong. If you disagree, fair enough. There are, I've heard some pretty reasonable arguments for gun control, but they just don't work for me. I honestly, I don't know what kind of person you have to be to support gun control. I know that sounds crazy because most people on the radical left would say the exact opposite, but here's the problem, okay? First of all, obviously, Second Amendment. Joe Biden with his comments about nuking American citizens have already made a bastardization of the government as it stands, but even if Biden wasn't the president, and even if those things weren't said, it still stands that the citizenry and a well-regulated, not government-regulated militia should and must exist in order to protect from tyranny. This is the other side of the coin from the policing question. If the state has a monopoly on violence, but only if they can earn it, then the other coin is the citizens have to have a way to revolt if the state stops earning it. If the state goes against what it stands for, which is to protect and serve, and tyrannizes against the population must be able to fight back. That's what the Second Amendment's about. It's not about hunting. It's not. It's not even about that citizens should own guns because they look cool or they're fun. That's what a lot of really out of touch liberals would say. The truth is, the Second Amendment exists and should and will continue to exist because the citizenry must be able to defend itself from the government. The government in all of its all of its best strides and all of its worst strides, if it becomes tyrannical, must be overthrown. We cannot live under tyranny. Now, that being said, a lot of moderates, not the least of which being Joe Biden, do agree that people can own guns, but that common sense gun restrictions should exist to prevent people from getting quote-unquote military-grade weapons. And one of the laughably overused examples of this is the AR-15, which is not military grade. It is civilian grade. But even if it was, fundamentally, that shouldn't really matter. I do not believe that there should be a limit to what kind of guns law-abiding citizens can have. And that crux is, of course, law-abiding. When it comes to criminals easily getting guns, the fact of the matter is they're going to get the guns anyway. Gun control doesn't work, and in its lack of working, inadvertently stops people who, like the good guy with a gun, from getting a gun and saving lives. There's a lot of statistics on this, but I'll just throw out a couple real quick. I believe that the current statistics are somewhere in the ballpark of 100,000 homicides, just gun deaths in general, where so a bad guy with a gun shoots someone else and kills them, right? But the thing is, that's an inflated statistic because it also includes suicides and a lot of legal loopholes that aren't really, I think most people would consider actual homicides. Now, compare that inflated statistic, which I wouldn't consider to be credible, but we'll compare that, to the estimated 3 million lives that are saved because people had guns. Yes, lives saved. Like, murders prevented, not caused. And the relationship is clear. It is not about criminals getting easier access to guns, and of course, the media blows up the whole thing about school shooters and these like edgy kids that have way easy access to guns and they fucking like commit massacres. That's not how it happens. It's just not. They don't get their guns illegally because it's much easier for them to get it illegally and to not have to go through all of the systems of background checks and regulation, which would normally catch someone like that. That's the problem. Criminals will get their guns no matter what. There will always be a black market for guns. The only way there can't be is for government tyranny, which only backs up the idea that citizens should have guns. To me, there is no way to justify, that would make sense to me, that gun control should exist in any form. Now, if you want to talk about background checks, and if you want to talk about identity verification, that would stop, let's say, someone who's already committed a criminal offense and has already served their time from getting a gun again, maybe we could talk about that. I would be a little more open to talking about that. But I am not open to talking about what Biden has called common sense gun restrictions. It's just absolutely ludicrous, and it violates our Second Amendment rights.
Do any of our guests have any comments?
One thing. So, the thing with no gun control is that there are things such as the Las Vegas shooting. Everything that shooter got was legal. The 1,000 rounds of ammunition, bump stocks were legal then, and a whole bunch of rifles. And nobody stopped him but himself. Additionally, it is very hard to, like I said, we do have to do background checks, but at the same time, background checks only get what's happening then. Things can still change over time. And honestly, it is good to keep a reduction on some things, or at least have the permit thing. Right now we have permits, so you can have automatic weapons and some range of hardware if you have the permit through, like, showing that you know how to use it and that you can, like, make sure to keep it safe. And there are ways to go around that thanks to our laxative policy. If we made the policy better by enhancing it every now and again, there would be less of that and it would be harder to get. Still, people would probably get it. At the same time, it would be harder, and if they were trying to get it, we could possibly track them and stop anything such as terrorist attacks, like the FBI does with potential terrorist attacks, especially by plane. The FBI is one of the more effective things, and thanks to gun control, they are able to find out about these things so that we don't have to fight about it in the newspapers. And I think that if without gun control, it just allows whole organizations to form up to do these events. And here's the thing. Even with, like, gun control, like, areas with bad gun control, occasionally when it comes to guns saving the day, it just doesn't work. One time in Los Angeles, two robbers robbed a bank using their own custom-made Kevlar armor. The police could do nothing, even with high-powered weapons, because they had illegal ammunition, and nobody could have possibly done anything, even with their guns. In the end, they were killed after a dozen police and SWAT units, almost in a bit of luck, because one of them was killed because they couldn't reload their gun, and one was killed because they were incapacitated because there was one part which wasn't armored. In situations like that, it doesn't matter what gun you have unless you have something that could possibly tear down buildings, which, if that got out into the public, it could cause terrorism on a massive scale. So honestly, for some law enforcement, I can imagine gun control would be a little bit lax for certain situations like that. But overall, gun control is a little bit important for things to prevent stuff like that, so that doesn't happen as common as it would without gun control.
So my counter to that, well, I have, I guess, two counters, but I'll start off with the most recent one. Your point of people are dying to guns and that's bad, which we all agree, right? But I think it's important to put this into context. Um, Last year, 2020, there were 44,000 people that died to guns. Now, about more than half of that, 24,000, were people who died to suicide. This should not really apply to the situation I'm presenting. The CDC says that each year, about 500,000 to 3 million people are saved by guns indirectly. So, a person who wields a gun shoots another person that probably has a gun. That is a life saved due to a gun. So, if we have this deficit of, at the very low end, over 450,000 people saved to guns, I'll take that any day of the week.
Right,
Oh.
and that's a good thing. That would be great for pistols, shotguns, semi-automatic rifles, bolt actions, and all of that. For anything fully automatic that could tear through body armor, it's a little bit suspicious. But it is for the Second Amendment. But at the same time, it promotes the use of going against police specifically, or the military, which once again goes to that Second Amendment. Overall, I think the Second Amendment doesn't really operate in today's society because we have a military with advanced weaponry that if there was a tyrannical government, even with advanced hardware, it would not be the same scenario as another nation. Because, okay, so let's say in Afghanistan, it is harder. You have more weapons there because imports from black markets and all that. But at the same time, it's a foreign community. We have military bases instilled everywhere. If the military started going against us, there is not really much we can do because they have tanks and we don't. So either we allow total anarchy where everybody has weapons and we can't trust each other, which was a bad period, which has happened before in a bad period of politics around the Civil War, when people started arming themselves with flintlock pistols. Right now, that would not even be really helpful because that means total anarchy all over, and by itself would just create a tyrannical society instead of a tyrannical government.
I think, just to
But-
counter that. Oh, okay, go for it. Sorry.
But what we have now is pretty good because, well, it doesn't help the Second Amendment because the Second Amendment kind of thing is a little bit iffy since our military is very powerful compared to our civilians, even with or without gun controls. Still, the reason why it works is because we have personal defense, but we don't use the absurd personal defense. We have personal defense in the form of small arms and civilian weaponry, which is what civilians should have. They should have shotguns and all that, and occasionally they should collect various weapons. And most of the time, people collect weapons, which look cool, and I actually kind of support with this, just so that they look cool and that they hang up on the wall and that they actually feel nice to shoot. And they use the excuse that it is in case for the Second Amendment. I don't think there's that many people who actually buy a gun in case the government goes tyrannical. There's very few people who I think actually believe that. Um, and I really don't think that. I think gun control and the Second Amendment kind of just. Well, the Second Amendment I don't think would work, and gun control I think helps ensure gun control and the Second Amendment just don't work together, and the Second Amendment don't work. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but just to mention something here, we had the same situation with the 13 colonies in Britain. No one thought that the 13 colonies would be on top, but somehow they did. They managed to defeat Great Britain, and they received independence. So I think it's really horrible to say that we should limit guns because there's no way in hell we stand a chance against the government. I just don't think it's a good statement to say, especially with this country's history. Cool. Let's move on to our next topic, which is living standards. So, in your guys' opinion, which country has the best living standard?
Easy answer. America. No,
Yeah.
no question about it.
Easy answer,
Easy
America.
answer. America.
It is.
Come on. Easy answer. Come on.
But we do
get
have guests.
Oh wait. Oh yeah. Sub Xerox and Titanium. How do you guys think? Which country is the best country to live in?
I mean, then again, you have to consider the actual areas of America. If you were going to consider it, of course, every nation has its areas. Like, there's always really a poor and rich range. Anything above the middle class, the America is good at, and so I'd have to say that that has the best living standards for the amount of people. However, there are still some communities which aren't as bad as other nations, but are pretty terrible. But an overall standing, America has some of the best living standards out there.
I completely agree with Sub Xerox. I haven't really lived in another country, and here it's pretty nice. And from the indexes, America is very high up on the list. So I would definitely agree that the U.S. has some of the best living standards in the world.
I will say just one thing. America has a very high living standard, even with people below the middle class. People who are in the middle class, and I'm not talking about people below the poverty line. I'm talking about people above the poverty line and in between the in between the middle class. Those people, they have a very high living standard. People are renting homes. People have cars. People have bicycles. People have TVs. People have enough money to go buy food. People live a life of luxury here that other people do not. Right? In a lot of other countries, people are taxed so much they don't have enough money to go buy some nice commodities like a new watch or something like that. So I think it's very important to note here that America has probably the highest living standard for all groups besides people below the poverty line. Son, do you have anything to add?
Not really. I mean, to be honest, we're overall the best country in the world, in my opinion. Not to brag, but to be honest, like we all live in America, so obviously we'll have a very high. Think of this country very highly than others countries. So yeah, that's it. Nothing much to it. Ciao. Do you have anything to add for this topic?
Okay. Okay. I don't really know a whole lot about the intricacies of living standards, especially when you go into the specifics of other countries. First of all, because I haven't lived anywhere else. But secondly, I don't really know a lot of the poorer perspectives of America, and then I don't know any perspectives of any other country. To be fair, I also don't know some of the the richer lives of America. I live in middle class suburbia. I could say, in my very subjective standpoint, my life is great. I have a lot of things that a lot of other people don't have, and I'd like to think I'm grateful for that. Maybe I'm not, but I try to be. I think that just by fact of being in America, it's got problems. The state can be very tyrannical sometimes. But overall, I think that America is, first and foremost, the best country. I just can't think of any better examples. I mean, Canada is I'd argue a close second, but, Canada's got its problems too, and a lot of the socializing aspects that have creeped in due to the ever march leftward of Canada's politics have led to a drastic decrease in the quality of life for a lot of people living there. But America is still pretty politically divisive, and thus, life's good.
Cool. I don't think there's much to speak about this. So yeah, we can move on to our last topic.
Wait, no,
Which
second to
is-
last topic.
Oh, excuse me. Second to last topic, but the last topic sort of a loose topic. So we're going to be talking about military funding. This sort of ties into the police, with Sub-Zero X bringing up the 1033 program. Recently, Afghanistan were pulling out from there. In my opinion, I don't think it's really a good move because the Taliban and other terrorist organizations are taking a hold of major cities. And I remember reading a U.S. report suggesting that there's a possibility in 6 months' time the Taliban could take over Afghanistan again by just taking over the main city. I think most people agree on this here, right, guys? Don't think there's much to say here.
Not really, no.
Most broke my computer.
Titanium, do you have anything to say about that situation?
Not really.
Yeah. We also have the cyber attacks that happened. I think we all agree on that. They're bad. I think we all agree that the administration has probably not done enough to protect these companies. Because a lot of the time they're paying their own ransom, and the U.S. has a tolerance of they don't give out ransoms. That's their position. I think we all agree on that. I assume we vary on GDP. I think some people here believe that the military is funded too much, right?
Nah, not enough.
No, it's
We-
it's definitely funded too much.
No, I don't think it's funded too much because there's reasons why we're one of the best military in the world, and that's a good title to have, in my opinion. It's a deterrent for people to try to invade us.
I think we're funded right now just right.
Actually, Biden's actually taking a lot of funding away from the military.
Right
if you've
now,
noticed.
in 2020, the U.S. military expenditure will reach an estimated $778 billion.
Yeah,
with a
and
billion.
what else would you want it to be spent on Wi-Fi?
What?
Wi-Fi can't beat wars.
Oh my.
Wait, what?
our
To be fair, I
military.
think cybersecurity is important.
Yeah,
which
I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah,
Cybersecurity
and
is
I
becoming
don't think the
important.
U.S.
Fiber
is
optic
involved into it.
infrastructure. Yeah.
Yeah,
The U.S.
feel
is
like
not involved in cyber enough, in my
I
opinion.
feel like
It's not.
they should make a segment in the military for cybersecurity so it can be included in that funding.
Definitely.
I think that venture should be explored more in our
God, you're all
government.
so cringe.
Okay,
You're so- Man,
so-
you don't like tanks, brother? Cool.
so I have something to say.
Go
So
ahead, Titanium.
I think that the military, I personally think that the military is funded way too much because all of that tax money, we have to remember this is money coming from people, right?
Exactly.
And it's being used by politicians who go into other countries and fight wars, right? So the issue with huge military spending is that that spending could be used for something else. Like what, you say? Well, like reducing the national debt, which is how many trillions right now? I don't know. But
30 trillion.
it's a lot, right? And spending that money on the military when there's clearly no threat of invasion to the United States is a little bit out there. because, like I said, that money can be used for other things. And I think that the military of the United States is already very well equipped, even if that budget was halved. I think that the United States military would still be the most powerful in the world because uh, no other country is even close to that budget. Besides China, increasingly, but
Right. That's
that's
the
taking decades.
that's the threat, in
Right.
my opinion.
Yeah, so to say that we have no enemies is just wrong because we do. A lot of nations
No,
hate
I didn't say we
America.
have. I didn't say we have no enemies, right? What
Well,
I'm
no
saying is
threats.
that there is no threat of invasion.
Uh,
That's, in my opinion, really out there.
uh,
But in terms of threats to U.S. alliances and interests, yes, what I think is that there's an issue if countries that you are allied with disagree with you on military actions or political actions. Like in the 2003 invasion of Iraq, many NATO countries disagreed with the United States over that invasion because the United Nations did not approve of it. But the US still invaded. And look at that country now. It's unstable. Many groups, military groups, are trying to take over and vie for power. And I just don't think that funding the military on campaigns in other countries, which have yielded zero result, is a good idea.
Coolio.
I think. Does anyone else have any opinions they want to state on the topic? Sub-Zero.
Not really. I don't have any opinions about it.
All right, let's move on to our final topic. Kaika, would you?
Yeah, so this was just a general discussion. I think the about world politics, the big news of the day, or I guess news of yesterday, is the Haitian president was assassinated by a group of militants who entered his home. They killed the president and they seriously injured the wife. The wife is now hospitalized in Miami. What do you guys think right now?
I mean, it's bad that Haiti is currently having an assassination, especially of their high-ranking official. But did they actually say what the group was behind it, or
No, it's due to military turmoil though, because they've had some rough patches in the past couple of years.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Haiti is not a very stable country politically.
Yeah.
I got no opinion on it because I don't even know what Haiti is. To be honest, I've never heard of the place.
It's next to the DR.
Oh, really?
yeah?
All right. Yeah,
It's in the Caribbean.
Just quickly Google
makes sense.
DR like you are right now.
Anyways, yeah, it sounds pretty pressing. Pretty sure the country's in disarray right now, but no really real opinion on it for the fact of that I know literally nothing about it besides the president's assassination. But yeah, that's all I have. Chow, do you have any final remarks of the topic? Chow.
Well, guys, I think that's it for today. Wow, this was a long one.
All right,
An hour
that was
and
a cool
half.
close off.
That was
Dang, yeah.
pretty.
That's a pretty
pretty
episode, an hour and a half.
crazy. For both of your very great, interesting, and right opinion. Goodbye. Get out of here. Thank you for listening to the Sons of Liberty. I've been King Chow.
I'm Kaika and Sunny is muted.
I'm Sunny. All right.
Alright, this has been a really great episode.
We worry about leaving a better planet for our kids. How about leaving better kids for our planet? Entire generation offended at everything, getting mad that a human thinks all lives matter. We don't need black or white or left or right. What we need is common sense. We need balance. We're all in the same boat. Why you trying to make holes? If they sink, we sink. This is madness.